And the Prime Minister says the Newman government will betray Queensland school children if it fails to sign up to the Gonski funding reforms today. The Queensland budget, to be released today, will need to include increased school funding for Queensland to qualify for the proposed boost in federal funding. With us now to discuss the budget is the Queensland Treasurer Tim Nicholls. Mr Nicholls, good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
Will the budget include increased education funding?
Well, in this budget we start a down payment on our Great Teachers, Great Results program that will see over $565 million being allocated over the forward estimates to improving teaching, teacher training, education and better results for our school children. We also put in an extra $100 million to complete the repair work and the backlog of maintenance that was left to us when we came to government last year. So over $800 million over 4 years being put into education here in Queensland. But we don't think that means we have to bow to the Prime Minister's unreasonable demands without being able to fully understand what it means when she talks about Gonski and the funding reform, and particularly when we see schools in Queensland worse off under that reform.
How is it unreasonable, Tim Nicholls? It's a 2-for-1 deal, the federal government putting in the bulk of the cash here under the Gonski reforms.
Well, what they're putting in is a large program. We already have a program that's underway that we are working on that will see great teachers being rewarded for the work that they do. Our independent public school system, which has been instigated by this government over the last 12 months, is up and running. We are not convinced the program being put forward by Canberra, which sees Canberra in control of Queensland schools, is the right outcome for Queensland students.
Well, the Prime Minister is accusing you and Campbell Newman and other ministers there of putting Liberal politics ahead of Queensland school children.
Well, of course you would say that. What we're saying is we have already put the funds in for our program up here to drive better results for our school children. What we're also doing is having a very close analysis of the offer that's been put forward, and quite frankly that offer doesn't stack up when it comes to providing the adequate outcomes that we want to see for kids here in Queensland. It transfers control to Canberra, it has more Canberra bureaucrats driving outcomes here in Queensland, and our experience of that has been far less than satisfactory.
It also includes $2.5 billion worth of Canberra cash.
Well, this is always the Canberra way, is to dangle big amounts of money in front of people. But when you look at where that money is coming from, it's coming a long way down the track. We're interested in results for our kids now, and we're not interested in handing over control of the operations of the Queensland Education Department to Canberra bureaucrats. We've made it abundantly clear. Our program, putting an extra $800 million over the forward forecasts into our Great Teachers, Great Results and our Maintenance Backlog program, is about outcomes for kids now, not for 4 or 5 years down the track.
Okay, why then did your Conservative colleague in New South Wales, the Premier there, Barry O'Farrell, agree it was perfectly reasonable and signed up to the Gonski reforms?
Well, look, I think if you look at what's happened down in New South Wales, you see that there are very real concerns around the Catholic and independent school system. You see Mr O'Farrell saying he wasn't given the full facts by the federal government in Canberra, and certainly in Victoria and other states we know that they are, like us, reluctant to sign up to this program simply because the details aren't there and it seems to hand control to a centralised bureaucracy in Canberra. We are interested in Queensland in delivering results for Queensland kids, not handing power back to Canberra.
Okay, let's go to the budget. This time last year, of course, we had a very tough budget, first budget by the Newman government, including those massive public sector job cuts. Will today's document be as tough as last year's?
Well, what we've done this year is focused on growth, rebuilding and resilience. Of course, we've had ex-tropical cyclone Oswald cause over $2.5 billion worth of damage here in Queensland. That's the result of the Australia Day floods and cyclone events. So we're rightly focusing on rebuilding. We're talking about resilience, so there's funding to build things better so they don't get knocked over by the next flood or next cyclone that comes through. And unashamedly, because we want to address issues around employment, we're going to be going for growth as well. So growth, rebuilding and resilience are the key themes, and we'll be putting money back into core services that are the dividends, if you like, of the decisions that we've been making over the last 12 months. So a solid budget that will deliver on core services around health, education, disability services and law and order.
Will there be more job cuts this time around?
No, we don't envisage that there'll be any changes in that sense. It'll be business going ahead in the normal course for the public sector. I do want to say that we have been able to reinvest the dividends of the tough decisions we made. We've been able to top out the Labor debt that was going to be $85 billion, the highest in the country. We're going to make sure that we don't reach that terrible plateau that was fast approaching, and we are going to be able to reinvest in services like health, like education, like law and order. Quite substantial sums of money going back into delivering those services. Clearing the cochlear implant waiting list, for example, cutting into waiting lists, reinvesting over $100 million in cutting the waiting lists that blew out under Labor. So these are real dividends from the decisions that this government has made over the last 12 months.
Now, in the lead up to the budget, the Queensland government has foreshadowed that the scrapping of a rebate on power prices, an increase in the emergency services levy. Can Queenslanders expect to be hit by more taxes and charges today?
Well, Michael, quite the contrary to what you're asserting there, we will be providing over $615 million in community service obligations to ensure regional and rural Queenslanders don't pay more than those in the southeast. We'll be putting $136 million into support for pensioners and seniors cards holders and people with medical needs who are accessing electricity. What we simply said is it didn't make sense to tax people on one hand and hand them a rebate on the other to compensate for a very substantial increase in electricity price rises. Electricity price rises driven by things like the carbon tax, the Australian Energy Regulator's gold plating of the networks, and also the previous government's failed solar feed-in tariff bonus scheme, which sees people being paid 44 cents a kilowatt hour for their power, whilst only being charged 22 cents a kilowatt hour for the electricity they consume. So we've had to deal with these bad policy decisions in the past, and we're doing so in this budget.
Okay, Tim Nicholls, Queensland Treasurer, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thanks, Michael.